Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Welcome to EIG's 52nd webinar and 7th in our series of webinars on new product introduction. In this particular series, this is a fireside chat discussion with our experts from the industry, Wayne Furgesson, Hosni Adra of CreateASoft, Dr. Phil Samuel, hopefully will be joining us, and Dr. Mark Sneeringer. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, and we look forward to your feedback throughout this session. Again, this is the 7th webinar in our Speed Through Resiliency NPI series, accelerating new product introduction, generating speed through digitalization. We appreciate you taking the time again, especially in light of coronavirus pandemic. We hope that your families are healthy and safe. We will discuss the best way to leverage digital tools today to develop self-generating and self-funding growth opportunities within your company with 90-day plans. Again, we look forward for this being a very interactive webinar. Please keep those questions flowing in the chat window. We'll be monitoring those and addressing them throughout the webinar. Please do log in to Poll EV and pollev.com/Jim DeVries 073, and we'll have polling questions throughout. We want, again, you can ask questions in the chat throughout the webinar, as well as participate in these polling questions. A little bit of background about my EIG. My name is Jim DeVries. I'm the founder and president of Enhance International Group. We're an exchange of passionate experts to guide your transformations to provide self-generating and self-funding results. We have over 50 consulting companies and SaaS providers that are leaders in their field, and they're all best in class, like all the gentlemen that we have on the call today. EIG serves as that master integrator to provide you the access to the latest and brightest companies. We're kind of like a Swiss Army knife. We'll bring out the tools that you need and the expertise you need when you need it. Our team is dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging our tenured thought leadership experience, and our goal is to exceed your expectations with customized, predictable, sustainable, and repeatable 90-day funding programs. So with that, we'll get started, and we're going to do a round robin here of introductions. We'll start with Wayne Furgesson, from the CEO of Signal, established in 2014, who's built an incredible platform. Wayne, a few words of introduction.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks for the opportunity to participate in your webinar. Maybe I should have done the poll, and this is the first one for me as well, so I'd add to that first timer category. As Jim said, Wayne Forgesson, CEO and co-founder of Signal Corporation, which is an open source intelligence gathering platform, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Wayne. Hosni?
Hello, everyone. Hosni with CreateASoft. I'm also a partner and a co-founder of CreateASoft. We build digital twin simulation software that helps you transition from improve efficiency and help you design new lines along the way.
Thank you, Hosni. And Mark?
Hi, this is Mark Sneeringer. I'm a continuous improvement consultant. Do a lot of work. A lot of my work is with companies building or repairing their new product introduction processes. I've been involved in this series of seminars or webinars with Jim since the first one on building a foundation, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion today about these tools and how they can sort of put a turbocharger on the NPI process.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. So with that, I think we're just going to dig right into it. And one of the things that when we look at digitization, we know we have this lack of supply and a changing demand. So we have both of these coming at the same time here with COVID. And the question is, can we put a digital capability on top of everything where we can innovate and digitize? And a lot what we talk about in supply chain risk management is how do we gain our unfair market share considering all these risk events? So every risk event that happens, the pandemic and so forth, that happens out there is an opportunity for you to show differentiation. And we're exploring today is how can digitization and innovation together provide an opportunity for you to gain that unfair market share. Because if you're able to move faster than your competitors, you will, this is a great opportunity to gain that growth. So any thoughts on that before we move on from our panel? No?
No.
All right. Mark?
Yeah, so go ahead and bring up the full thing of the slide. Basically, there's a need for speed in the new product and new service development, and you can see that in that generations of products are in the market less and less time before the next one comes along or needs to come along. But one of the reasons we got into this series of webinars was the fact that there were some things that came about with the global pandemic that put sort of speed bumps as you try to go fast on this NPI stuff. So reduced customer interactions because of travel restrictions, things like that. Same with face-to-face collaboration and in-person experimentation, and then what Jim already talked about of the disrupted supply chains. So as we've talked through these webinars, it's how do we either regain the speed or even increase that speed in your NPI process, and that's why we want to focus in on these digital tools today.
Yeah, so we're really at a quandary here, right? So before the pandemic, right, we were moving very, very quickly on the left-hand curve where product life cycles were getting shorter and shorter. And we were kind of building some kind of cadence and momentum around that. But now we have all these disruptions going on. But at the same time, the need for different products and services has changed. But we still have that overall drive to shorten life cycles for products. And it's accelerating. But it's accelerating maybe in a different direction than what we originally thought. Yeah. And so that having that flexibility to be able to maneuver that, I think, is one thing that we felt that digitization can greatly provide insight to make sure that what you do focus on is to the new normal, that we don't know what it is, but we still need new products out there.
If I could just jump in there as well, Jim. I mean, your comment, Mark, about reduced customer interactions, absolutely correct. But I'd also counter that with say there's an increase in customer interactions moving online. There is a lot more of those interactions that previously were face-to-face that are now happening online, and organisations absolutely need to keep a close eye on those.
Yeah, great point. I mean, the data are out there. It's how do you gather that data and do something with it.
Exactly. And the other thing that you have to keep in mind with that short time span, you really cannot wait for an unexpected event to disrupt the development process. So you really need to be proactive in knowing what can happen and do more analysis up front in order to avoid any potential risks that will extend that life cycle of the product development.
Okay. Great conversation. So with that, I think we'll just go ahead and kick it off with the agenda today. We will talk about these three topics here on digitization, three key insights. Number one is modeling is easier and more impactful with digital tools, and Hosni will give us some insights there. Then we'll talk about ways to digitally touch customers in the ideation phase, and Dr. Phil Samuel, who just joined, will kick us off with that, and then we'll go into sentiment analysis with Wayne. And then the complexities of the digital design process does not need to be foreboding, as we say. And there are tools to help us. There's a lot of different databases, different ways that we store our data in the design process. And there are tools out there to help centralize that. And we'll wrap up with that if we have time. And with that, we'll get started on the first topic. Modeling is easier and more impactful with digital tools. Again, real-time digital twin simulation before you build your processes and products. So we're talking about how can we use simulation before you build your process and products to help you and make it more impactful. So Hosni has some great insights there. Again, if you've watched any of our series, we have used this slide. It's a little busy, but if you break it out, the phase gates are the typical new product introduction phase gates that most of us are familiar with. You define your customer business requirements, conceptual design, preliminary design, detailed design, prototype, pre-launch, and full launch. So those are our core steps. And what we're focusing on here are things that we had not addressed in our previous webinar. So we did talk about this in another webinar, simulation, transfer, and function modeling, but we didn't talk about the plant layout. So this is where we're focusing our next set of discussions. So with that, Hosni.
All right, thank you, Jim. So just going through the same train of thought, basically, if you are building a facility, you wouldn't do it without an architectural drawing. You wouldn't do it without actually planning ahead of time how things are going to be, where things are going to be located inside, where the beams are going to be, how you're going to support it. The same with electrical and everything else that has to be done. The thing is, when people are designing new product, you kind of go in and you say, I want to put these machines in these locations, and I want to run it in a specific way, without actually pre-planning all the way to know what kind of impact that's going to have on the operation. So if you put the beam in the wrong place in a building, that will be a disaster going forward, and you want to avoid that. The same concept apply to actually how you lay out the line to design this new product, to build this new product. So as an example, this is a full warehouse implementation. It's fully automated. It's as complex as you want it to be. But you wouldn't do that without actually knowing upfront what's going to happen into the warehouse before you start putting the equipment down, buying the equipment, identifying what type of equipment you need, what kind of automation you're going to use. So all that stuff needs to happen up front. And you do that through the digital twin modeling in an environment where you can actually play and see where the problems are going to be. I mean, that's really the advantages of simulation, is where you can kind of look into the operation and identify, is this going to work? Do I have the right speeds? Do I have the right equipment? What happens when, machines go down? What happens when I have to change the actual raw material that are coming in? Now they have different components and different aspects to them, and my cycle times start to change. All these become aspects that you would be able to do upfront before you even buy the equipment and set them up. So they're all virtual representation of the line. And guess what? If that doesn't work, then that's fine. It's electrons that are not working the way we want them to work, right? So we can always adjust things and fix things on the computer before we actually put anything on the floor and buy and identify the actual final equipment that are going to be used. Everybody assumes that this is a much longer time cycle, and that actually will delay the launch of the product. In fact, that's going to help you upfront to identify the right product, the right mix that you need to do, the right components that you need to set up. And then at the same time, you'll be able to reduce time at the end when you actually put the line up and start running. It's going to run the way you expect it to. You're going to have a lot less risk going into it, and a lot less gotcha that'll come back and say, you know, that will affect the overall operation. So that's really where those tools come in. It's really to help you design up front and make sure you know where you're going before you actually implement anything on the operation. Next one, please.
So are there any questions from anyone? Like, something that comes to my mind is how many resources are required, and how do you fit this into all the other activities of setting up a plant? Who do you fold into? Who are some of the key stakeholders that you work with, Hosni?
Excellent. So that, you know, the stakeholders are going to vary. They're going to have the people who will actually run the operation. You're going to have the IEs that are designing the operation. Everybody who's got a cost or has an interest in the way it's going to run, it's going to affect them. So it could be different departments within the plant that are going to be receiving that new product that they're going to work on. They need to be involved in that. Now, to build those kind of lines, it's actually not as complex as it needs to be. It will take sometimes days or a couple of weeks to get things up and running, and then you'll start doing some analysis in detail. Visually, you'll be able to see what's going on, and at the same time, you'll be able to see the impact of those changes. So we always like to make sure that everybody who is going to be affected by whatever change you make on the system be present in those discussions.
So you may have already said this. I see a question around how early in the process do you team up with the people as they're designing it, as they're starting to lay it out, or do they already have it kind of laid out and then you're involved? At what juncture is it important to get involved?
The best thing to do is when you start thinking about it, is when you start putting it on the screen. If you put a layout, then you might as well have done it within a digital twin environment, because that's going to help you do the layout anyway. So if you do the layout outside of the digital twin, then you're kind of duplicating the work in the operation itself. So as early in the process as you can start, the better the benefit is going to be at the end.
Okay.
You don't want to start building ideas of this is how it's going to be laid out, and people automatically will start to identify where they're going to position the line, how it's going to work, and so on. And that becomes every time you need to make a change, it actually becomes harder to convey that idea to everybody else. But as you're going through, I mean, the actual representation goes all the way from the visual of what it's going to do, to the basic layout of the operation. Then you start kind of bringing in data into it to help you identify how it's going to work. Early on, you don't know enough about the operation, so you start bringing randomized data, and you will create what we call the randomized twin. So as you build and as you gain knowledge, and then combine data from other sources or other lines that you have, you actually transition to a data-driven twin, which really where you want to be in order to be very proactive. And that twin that you create now becomes an exact replica of what you have on the line in the real-time world. So you can actually use it to analyze the line in real time. At the same time, you can do predictive analytics on it. What happens if my raw materials change, my cycle times change, my conveyor breakdown, I have one less piece of equipment today. So all these become things that you'll be able to quickly analyze. And because it's data-driven, you can actually feed the data in from very basic sources, that's as simple as a web page, to identify that something went down, or it could connect to your data systems as a real-time component to actually drive the
So
analysis.
Hosni, if I have a plant in the US and now I want to build that same plant in Penang, Malaysia, I could use the US as the data-driven twin, and then build and optimize a new plant that I build in Penang, let's say.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Exactly. And then the benefit there is you have the data already from the US plant. So you can actually start applying that to the Asian plant, and then you'll be able to identify their constraints as it applies to the actual, whether the supply chain, the material they're using, the actual work environment, the whole operation. But you already know how the equipment are going to work. So now you can fit that equipment change within the overall process.
Yeah, one of the things I've run into, and not around this, but around modeling and capability analysis in general with NPI programs, is folks don't understand that they've got a lot of data available to them in similar processes.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe it's not the same product, but it's the same process, or maybe it's just a similar process. You can learn an awful lot from them in terms of, you know, what sort of variation you're going to see and those sorts of things. And so I would see that those sort of data being very useful for the data-driven twin before you actually get out there with, you know, with hardware on the floor.
Exactly. That's a great point. Those data points are key to actually making it work even better. The mistake we see a lot on the randomized side, before you actually have the data or any, you know, good data points, is that people would use the best operating performance of any of the machines they're going to use. So if a vendor says it's going to be up 99.9%, they will put in 99.9% as an uptime on the machine. We all know that's not going to happen. And then they design the line based on that, and then things starts to break. Well, that's where those twins will actually come in handy, and you'll be able to see what are the variations, what are the limits that you can run the line at, so that you can maintain that throughput that you expect all the way through. But that's very common. You just come in and you see, you know, line design based on maximum throughput that, you know, in reality cannot be attained. And the lines will start to break. So
Hosni, I think that what you brought up is really key, is that and you mention it quite often throughout your talks, is really identifying those constraints and boundaries and testing those. That's often, there's a lot of assumptions under that in general when you're laying out a new plant. And I think, Mark, you brought up the same point. And the nice thing is, when you lay this out, you're able to test those constraints. You know, do you change the size of the motor? Do you change the size of the line? You know, all those different things you can play with to say, you know, does it really give you flexibility? You can try different products. If you're running, you know, different types of products down the line, there's a lot of things you can test here to make sure that your plan is adaptable to the changing flow of your SKUs as they're rolling out, and your changeovers and so forth. So it's just so powerful what you can do here. It's something that we should, and it's, you know, I don't like to say it, but it's not like inordinately expensive to do this. It's not like millions and millions and millions. It's not like tons of money to do these types of things, if I could be so bold to say, right?
Right, exactly. And you know what, the cool thing about it is, if you find that you have the wrong conveyor speed, then you basically change the conveyor speed on the computer. You don't have to go in and rework all your PLC code to adjust to that. So
yeah, because we all know that, we all know the handoffs, like you said, the handoffs are what throughout the plan are what kills you. Yep. And if you don't have those synchronized, the beautiful thing about your simulation is you can work on those. So let's look at what a simulation looks like, right?
Yep. So this is basically an example line. This is a very simple, it looks actually very simple and straightforward line once you look at it running, but there's a lot of synchronization that has to happen there's a lot of automation that has to occur on these pieces of equipment as the parts are flowing through. So those sequences will have to be tied in. And it looks like a fully optimized line because it is, and it's been optimized on a virtual twin, on a data-driven twin, basically before anything was actually designed or put on the floor. When this started out, it was nothing was working. There was a lot of buffers. There was a lot of things that are actually waiting on those conveyors for anything to happen. So the throughput suffered. There was a lot of rejects, and as soon as the data-driven twin was actually put in place, all these things got cleaned up, and all that happened before anything was built in the real life environment. So once you're done with that, you can take that and plug it into the full representation. Now you can see, if I take that operation that I optimized and I put it in my full plant, how is this going to work? Is it going to be too fast for anything downstream from it? Or is it going to have enough products coming into the operation from an upstream? And did I optimize it to the point where I moved the bottleneck to another department that now has to be optimized? So that's really the advantages of taking that twin and putting it into the global representation of the plant, to say, what kind of impact that's going to have on my operation? How is it going to affect the packaging? How is it going to affect my warehouse? Or how is it going to affect all the sub-assemblies that have to go into my operation? And you can do all that stuff live on the simulator. You can change whatever you need to do. You do the analysis, and guess what? If that proves to be a problem, you go back and readjust the main line and fix it up. But these are kind of the advantages of these type of systems.
So with that, we have our first polling question to rank on how you would use a digital twin in design. Would you look at to simulate a new product processes like Hosni just mentioned? Would you simulate integrating a new product within existing production? So you already have production and you're looking to simulate what it takes in that new product that you're launching? Or C, exploring production options? Or D, simulate of product performance through end of life? So Hosni, why don't you talk a little bit about D? We explain what we're talking about there.
So this is really simulating what will happen on the product performance. So this is really ranked from the poll to be the least. But really, how is it going to go through? And as you gain knowledge of what's happening on the line, you can feed that data in and identify how those data points, where you started from, actually, how it's going to end up with the production line going forward. The thing is, specifically, if you're trying to phase things out and actually change the line or add some different components to the line or readjust the line to run different type of products, that will be, the simulator will actually help you figure out how you transition the line and reuse it to use different the same line, basically, with different components and different aspects of it. So you're not always using it to design a new line, but actually how you transition the line going forward through time to transition the products or create variations of that product.
So Mark, what's your experience? Where have you seen this work?
So the top two, I guess it's now the top three elements there, are the ones that is like with an NPI team, you want to know how, especially if it's integrating a new product into existing production, how are you going to phase it in? How is it going to run once it's in there? This makes a lot of sense. I also see sort of the evolution that I saw in product function modeling happening here, where you build these individual pieces, and then over time you get the entire factory built. Whereas like with a product design, I simulate this subsystem, and then I simulate that subsystem, and before over time I build a simulation for the entire product. And so I could see that as a path for people to get into this sort of stuff is start with what they need to do as part of that particular NPI project, and then expand it from there.
And Dr. Phil, how about you? You've done a lot of work with companies over the years in these areas. You're on mute now, but what are your thoughts here? You're on mute.
I think the answer is always it depends. If it is in the context of an existing production facility and you're going to change one operation, there's lots of data available. I would use this to explore my options and its implications. But if it's a brand new stuff that you're producing from scratch, then the simulation of what data is available, I might do things differently. But the top three lists that we have, ABC, probably still makes sense in terms of the biggest opportunities. But the game is changing now, as Hosni pointed out. The digital twin and the amount of data available is creating the acceleration of new product development in ways that we didn't see way before.
And Wayne, any thoughts from your perspective over your past experience?
No specific comments. Very interesting, and yeah, I just wish I had this technology many years ago.
I mean, you can limit, this is, right now we're talking about hardware, but in essence, you can simulate anything, right? You can simulate transactions, you can simulate service environments, you can, you can simulate the new product design process if you wanted to. So really, you're only limited by your own imagination on what boundaries you want to put on what you can simulate. Wouldn't you say, Hosni?
Exactly.
We talk about this all the time.
Exactly.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
Excellent.
Cool. We could spend more time on this, but I want to get to the next topic, which is around the ideation phase, the time when you're gathering information from the customers. And I think the point here is there are so much data available, and it's how do you take that fire hose of data that's out there and turn it into things that you can actually make decisions on. And so that's why I'm excited about the tools we're going to talk about. So we're back at the front end of that, the flow for a new product or a new service. And we're gonna touch specifically things around the people analytics and digital market analysis. But there's a number of tools in here. Phil's gonna hit a few of them very briefly about how you can gather information about the customer needs and about ways to impact those customer needs through a lot of digital technologies that are available today. So I'm going to turn over to Phil to do a quick run through some of the things that he's been working with.
Thanks, Mark. So first of all, every single phase of the product development can significantly enabled by digital transformation. So having said that, now if you look at the front phase, that is gathering customer needs, identifying the needs, prioritizing, all of that, we found out that digital enablement has a new approach or a new way to increase the speed or increase the quality of it. A lot of these tools that we have available have existed for a while, but the fact that during COVID, it changed, it put lots of pressure on it. It put restrictions on us. And all of a sudden, adoptions for the digital enablement has significantly accelerated. For example, people used to do design sprints to go identify the customer needs. I used to, or my team used to lead a design sprint where they go spend 3 days on a problem and then really get into the depths of what is broken, what is the unmet, what jobs are customers struggling to get done. And then they go do more research, come back in the next month and do 3 days of sprint of coming up with new ideas and so forth. When it came down to the COVID time, physical meeting became harder. So people started reinventing that approach. So one approach I have seen is instead of meeting that 3 days or being physical, can you do staggered designs? I'll make it in a clear example. I led a team of 14 companies, 70 people, trying to solve a problem that we deal with every day. That's the packaging of food items. So it really went into, is it recyclable? Is it compostable? Is it reusable? Usually we would have spent 3-4 days taking the problem apart into about 100 pieces and work together as 10 teams. So in this case, we did a series of 1-hour sprints and groups of 10. So 70 people are 7 groups. And we tore the problem apart, generated again, same close to 100 ideas, 100 problems. Then we had more staggered solutions on ideation and so forth. So that's the idea behind staggered program design. We can do the same thing, achieve the same objectives, but do in a miniature fashion, enabled by technology. And the 1 hour is feasible because we don't have to be together. We don't have to worry about getting on a plane and going someplace, and therefore we need to spend the day. That's problem is solved. The second problem is gathering customer needs. This is, the famous quote that is, if I ask my customers, they ask for faster horse. So we believe customers' behavior is a much bigger predictor of the need rather than what they say. Therefore, ethnography. Well, before we would go to the Gemba, go to the place where the work gets done, and we observe the customers. COVID made it harder. So then we started rethinking about how do we get customers' behaviors without going there. So more and more companies are using an approach of remote observation, equipping a GoPro camera with the people doing the work, or using drones to go visit or observe the stuff that is a construction site. And much more technologies have evolved. I've seen drone approach to collecting live data and aided by AI ML to get better insights. So that's the observation stuff. Collaboration, I think we are all used to now, completely comfortable with the Zooms and Team and Google Meet and so forth for collaboration. But it seems that having short meetings, 45 minutes, 1 hour meetings, seems to be very helpful. You can collaborate with teams around the globe. The next big revolution is the fact that now we have technologies enabling lots of data. We also have a significant play with the AI. So with AI, we can do all kinds of thinking, all kinds of data analytics. We can do natural language processing. So since you don't believe what people say to you in a focus group, what's their behavior? What are they tweeting? What are they putting in the dark web? What emotional things are they putting up? Can we gather that insights? Can we look them up differently? And if you have lots of data, can you segment them rather than putting the data into a statistical package and doing a k-means clustering? Can we do learning models and segment it and create better knowledge and learning? So all of these things that I mentioned, you can easily apply to the front phase of gathering the voice of the customer. But you can also apply many of these thinking across the new product development phases.
So Phil, this is fantastic. I think what I love about this list is it doesn't need to be complicated. I mean, it's a great list of things that are out there today and can be done today. This has been available for a while, and now it's being more accepted as mainstay, and we should be looking at this much differently as far as gathering customer needs. There's a myriad of tools. So I think one of the coolest tools, if we can segue ourselves into Wayne, what he's done with sentiment analysis. He has a lot of different products, but maybe it's a good segue to him. Phil, any closing remarks? Is that good?
I 100% agree. Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. So Wayne, it's all
Cool.
yours.
Thanks, Jim. And I'll step through a few things, but just before I do, just going back to your slide for one quick comment, just to really make people aware, you talk about technology aided observations. I completely agree. There are tools that will enable you to see what people are doing online as well. So actually follow what they're doing on the screen for an application. So the same thing applies in respect of software development and application development as well. So I knew you'd know about that, but just to point that out as well. From a perspective of where Signal fits in, we're open source intelligence, and really what I'm getting to with that is it's about, touched on it before, a lot of the face-to-face communication is no longer there with COVID, with lack of travel and so on, and yet a lot of that communication is still happening online. And as we all know, there's a goldmine of data available out there. And the key thing is to, continuing on from what Dr. Phil was talking about, the key thing is to leverage that information, bring that in both from existing customers, but also from the general marketplace. What are people talking about? What do people feel about initiatives, events? How do we leverage that information and really get that to come in as an input, if you like, into our analysis and so on. Now, the key thing there is there's obviously a lot of that information. So that's where you've really got to leverage AI, machine learning, natural language processing, those sort of tools, really to look at things like sentiment and emotion, really drill into, okay, how are people feeling about stuff? What is the nature of the conversations that are happening out there? And you can probably just sort of skip through these every couple of minutes, Jim, and I guess part of that is look at the insights of different aspects. So it's not just how do people feel, but how do people feel from different regions, different locations, and how you can track that over time. So the background to Signal really was in respect of safety and security. So tracking how an event may track over time, tracking how an organization's response to an event may track over time. And the other thing is you've got to look at so much more than just social. So the social event is critically important, but a lot of the conversations that were happening on social platforms aren't actually happening on social platforms anymore, or there's an increase in conversations in platforms like the dark web, like the Telegrams, Discords, both from a negative point of view, but also from a product, from an organization, from a risk reputation perspective. People are having, and there was one I noticed just yesterday, a share investor conversation about an organization I've got some shares in, happening on Discord, no longer in the public domain, now happening in a Discord group. So as the organization, if you were interested in what people are saying about regards share transactions and so on, you'd need to be monitoring what that conversation was on that Discord platform, just as a very simplistic example. So another key factor is a lot of the traditional tools, and there are plenty of them out there, a lot of the traditional tools are kind of end of week reporting. So this is what happened over the week, and here's how things have changed. The reality is we're working in a real-time world, and even more so than we ever have. So if there are things happening, if there's an increase in, I don't know, angry or sad or fearful emotions around a product or an organization, then you want to know about it straight away. You want to be alerted to that fact as soon as possible. If things are starting to go viral, you don't want to wait till the end of the week, because at that stage they've gone from being viral to being mega viral. So you want to be alerted. You want to be proactively alerted to things as soon as they may be happening, and then you can deal with it and bring in your operation procedures to fore. And I guess the last thing is really another consideration from a perspective of manufacturing and in fact all aspects of business really are what are the impacts on supply chain. And here's a couple of real world scenarios. The one on the top right is about an organization, obviously we're keeping anonymous. They find feedback straight away around a way to defraud that organization. And this is a conversation that goes viral in a private forum, private sessions, and they found out about it pretty quickly, and they were able to make some changes to their business, and that change saved them literally hundreds of thousands of dollars through the simple identification of these conversations around how to defraud that organization. Bottom left, real topical case at the moment, ransomware. Knowing if your supply chain is going to be potentially impacted by ransomware. Suppliers are probably going to be the last people to tell you that they've been under attack by ransomware. They'll tell you when they have to. You want to know if that organization or your suppliers are being mentioned on ransomware sites. That's an early indicator that there's going to be trouble, whether that be product won't arrive, whether that be maybe there's some of your data is involved in that ransomware and it's going to become public knowledge and so on. So monitoring what's happening from a key supply chain perspective is another key area where you're able to get that insight from that gold mine of data. And I mean, the last slide really, you take the last slide out, which is great. The last slide really, I'll just hang on this for a second, is seeing this information appearing online real time is a good way to keep an eye on things, but by the same token, having powerful visualizations, having the ability to run proactive reporting and being alerted and notified to aspects as they may happen is obviously critical as well. So thanks, Jim.
Hey, Wayne, we've got a question on the somebody put in the chat, and it's so can you talk about what you've just been talking about, the where you've used these sort of data and data gathering to help a product design team do something better or different than they would have done?
Yeah, well, not so much on product design team, but that one of those examples I talked about was really reacting to something that was happening online. So as I said, the conversation was around, okay, here's an organization, here's a process by which you can defraud that organization. And it was all around the return of goods under warranty claims. So you could basically get a popular consumer product, you could go through a process, you could claim a warranty, you could get a replacement product, and you never had to send them back the product. The flaw in their process was they weren't waiting for the product to come back, because obviously that takes time and customers get upset. So they were literally sending out, and we're talking multi-$100 items, to anyone that went through the process in the right way, used an appropriate serial number. By the way, you can buy those serial numbers. I think about $10 a 100 for serial numbers on the dark web. You could make claims, and there was guidance around how you could do that. And the organization suddenly realized that they needed to change their process. They needed to put in a couple of extra steps to make sure that the claims were legitimate, that the product was going to an actual owner of a product, not to someone who happened to buy some serial numbers online, go through the appropriate process, and then get delivery of a multi-$100 product.
Having lived through NPI projects where we sit there at some point and say, okay, what's the warranty process going to be? Are we, we want to be customer, serving by saying, yes, if you have a problem, we want to get you a correct thing quickly, versus that whole potential. Something like this would have made that discussion a lot easier and a lot faster. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If I just want to interject and say, this is huge. I mean, the fact that you can actually know what customers think about the product and things that need to be improved ahead of time. It could be a switch that's misplaced, or somebody's having problem to turn it on or do something with it. You can automatically take that into your twin, the digital twin of the operation, make the change, identify how that can be applied, and roll the change on the product very quickly within the week time frame that other companies, other reports were just they're just starting to tell you of when that problem occurred. So that's just speed of turnaround is amazing.
Sorry.
Yeah, so just to get everybody on the same page, if I'm correct, we're talking about the pre-launch phase here, but that's often overlooked. We don't spend a lot of time on this because we don't have that data feedback, but when you do launch a new product, we can get sentiment immediately feedback and adjust the product right away instead of waiting months or even years before we change it. So this tool, your sentiment analysis, provides an incredible insights on that launch.
So
Did I say that right?
right. So there is another piece of it. Mark touched on it. That is, in the world of new product development, we used to do focus group.
Yeah,
So
up in this range here too.
In a
Also.
focus group, nobody's going to walk up and say, I can do this fraudulent thing this way, or I'm going to break it this way.
Yeah.
So we are now getting people to express their emotional brain to do things, and they're posting it. You would have been able to get that kind of information previously. The behavior is now saying, yes, I have a product already in the market, but based on some of the things we are seeing, Wayne didn't go into the details. We can break them down into 6 emotions, and we go into those emotions. It might give you trigger ideas on how to create the new feature in your next product launch. And if I take the definition of Mark's product to product and services and business model, implications are huge.
Yeah.
And it can happen at any of the phases of this.
The business model should not be undervalued. A lot of what Wayne is talking about can greatly affect your business model. Great point, Phil. Did I interrupt someone saying something?
No, I was just going to say, we used to call what we did in that pre-launch phase and full launch phase fast field feedback. I'm going to have to redefine fast.
We get Wayne on the team here with Signal. That's as fast as you can get. And as Hosni said, putting that into the digital twin, in your production, and I mean the ramification even on how production's running. There's incredible amount of opportunity here to help hone this overall process using Signal's sentiment analysis. So I think
Interesting stuff.
It's very, very interesting. So I think what we're going to do, are there any other questions or comments? Because I don't think we have enough time to really tackle another topic.
I don't see, there was one I think we already handled back on about data for building the digital twins, but I think we covered that in what Hosni presented in the discussion we had there. Okay. Other than that, I think we're ready for the poll that you had there.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Mark. There is a polling on what applications you see for sentiment analysis. We started talking about them just a few minutes ago. I guess we got ahead of the poll, huh? So please go ahead and type in your thoughts on how do you see the sentiment analysis used. It's such a powerful tool. Customer service, oh yes, absolutely. Marketing. So Wayne, how many different applications have you seen? Or are you seeing more, more and more now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's ever growing. I mean, a key one is reputational risk, as I say, organizations where people are talking about situations where people are talking about organization in negative fashions. And in our case, from a safety and security perspective, that reputation risk can quickly turn into potential areas of concern. I mean, people these days are very quick to jump on the keyboard and express their frustration, but another key factor there is that can then drive other behaviors, other people who may take that to another step and actually take inappropriate actions and so on. So reputation risk is a key one for us. And I mean, all these ones are very, very valid.
I love that risk mitigation is coming up on top. That's a topic near and dear to my heart. We do a lot here. We have a webinar in MPI on risk mitigation. And and I think, Wayne, you do a lot in risk mitigation yourself, right?
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah, it's a natural place for this type of tool. And Wayne, you're coming up with a new module, right? After the sentiment, you have the emotional, and then you're coming up with a new way of looking at things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're continuous improvement is a key mantra for the organisation, and we're always coming up with new things. But we're doing a bunch of work around some of that localization, country region stuff, further improving sentiment and emotion analysis, leveraging AI, email, relevancy ratings, so relevancy to certain categories, risk mitigation or reputational risk being a new category we're working on. So nothing stays still.
Nothing stays still. Yeah, another big topic we didn't talk about today is ESG, environmental. No, what is this? Not sustainability. Now I forgot. That's terrible. But there's a lot of different folks using the sentiment analysis, I think.
So do you mean environmental, social, and governance?
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
You're always my linchpin.
Well, I was sorting through my my 3-letter acronyms here, and
Thank you, but
and
there's a lot
found
of
that,
opportunity
yeah.
here for this in that world also, right? So, well, this looks really cool. Any comments from the rest of the team before we wrap it up?
I think, the risk mitigation definitely is is sort of the overarching thing of how you would how you would deal with a lot of the things like finding defects in the out there before they become an epidemic, figuring out did you actually do the thing, did you have some sort of a PR, is there a PR thing going on? So yeah, so risk mitigation I think is definitely the key use of what I was seeing today.
Any other comments from the panel?
My only one quick comment is it's not on this workload, and for good reason, because it hasn't really been a conversation that we've been alluding to. But the one thing that's missing off there is competitive awareness as well.
Competitor awareness, yeah, something
Good point.
Yeah, and it's so elusive today. I think people forget about it, how important it is. But we have in the past, it's very hard to get competitive information. But now with sentiment analysis, there's a whole new way of getting that. I think that's a brilliant comment, Wayne. That's a real good opportunity using this platform. All right, fantastic feedbacks. Thanks everyone for that. With that, we're going to wrap up. We did not think we'd get to the last section, and we didn't. So I'm just going to skip through to the end here. We can bring that topic up at another time. Again, thank you for joining us today. And as you know, we are a group of 50 consulting companies and SaaS providers, and we're growing every day. And we appreciate your time. We do have webinars coming up on February 22nd. And March 17th, we have one with Sigmax with Mark on February 22nd. It's implementing face-to-face visibility with minimum disruption, how to navigate the supply chain turmoil that we're in today. And then, so we have another one in March on the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium and developing your tailored supply chain risk and resiliency game plan. And there's a number of additional webinars coming up. But thank you again for your time. With that, any closing comments from our panel?
Great hour. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. This is very insightful.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity.
Certainly interesting topic for all of us.
Thanks again. Thanks for all the participants, and have a great day.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.